How is it possible to ration a life-saving resource? If you could decide to save someone's life, but in doing so condemn another to death, how would you choose? This was the question put before a 7-person panel in 1962. It was up to them, not the doctors, to decide who received dialysis. At the time, dialysis was a novel invention. Basically, it functions as a mechanical replacement for the patient's kidney, but it came at a cost. A patient must be hooked up to a machine twice a week for 4 hours, and the costs back then, and still today, were extremely high. In 1962, for every 1 open spot for dialysis, there were 50 patients who applied. So how do you even go about selecting the patients? The kidney doctors didn't want this burden, and so they turned to the Seattle-King County Medical Society to put together a so-called life or death committee. 7 people were chosen: a lawyer, a housewife, a banker, a surgeon, a minister, a state official, and a labor leader. Medically, the kidney doctors offered the following rules. The first rule the committee passed was to automatically reject any patients over 45 years of age. Older patients could develop more comorbidities than younger patients. The board also voted to reject any children, as the nature of the treatment itself might cruelly torment or terrorize a child. There are also some scientific considerations, as it was unclear if children could grow and thrive while undergoing dialysis. Past these filters, the committee had to make their own rules on how to select the patients. The committee decided to keep their names strictly anonymous, and also anonymize the names of their patients to prevent any bias. Then they drew up a list of factors which would influence their decision: age, sex, marital status, number of dependents, income, net worth, emotional stability, educational background, occupation, past performance, which I'm going to be honest, I have no idea what this means, and future potential. Next, they agreed to only consider applicants who are residents of Washington state, as the funding for the program was from the state. They figured that the people who paid the taxes should be the beneficiaries. One committee member remarked, "This was arbitrary too, but we had to start somewhere." Just from these filters, the committee had reduced the amount of patients clamoring for one dialysis spot from 50 to 4. So now, out of the 4 patients who are under the age of 45, not a child, and a resident of Washington, one of them would receive the life-saving treatment. Here's a sample of the dialogue between the committee members as reported by Life magazine in 1962.
Patients number 1 and number 5 can last only a couple more weeks. The others probably can go a bit longer. But for purposes of your selection, all 5 cases should be considered of equal urgency because none of them can hold out until another treatment facility becomes available.
Are there any preliminary ideas?
Just to get the ball rolling, why don't we start with number 1, the housewife from Walla Walla?
This patient could not commute for the treatment from Walla Walla, so she would have to find a way to move her family to Seattle.
Exactly my point. It says here that her husband has no funds to make such a move.
Then you are proposing we eliminate this candidate on the grounds that she could not possibly accept treatment if it were offered. How can we compare a family situation of 2 children, such as this woman in Walla Walla, with a family of 6 children, such as patient number 4, the aircraft worker? But are we sure the aircraft worker can be rehabilitated? I note he is already too ill to work, whereas number 2 and number 5, the chemist and the accountant, are both still able to keep going.
I know from experience that the aircraft company where this man works will do everything possible to rehabilitate a handicapped employee.
If we are still looking for the men with the highest potential of service to society, I think we must consider that the chemist and the accountant have the finest educational backgrounds of all 5 candidates.
How do the rest of you feel about number 3, the small businessman with 3 children? I am impressed that his doctor took special pains to mention this man is active in church work. This is an indication to me of character and moral strength.
Which certainly would help him conform to the demands of the treatment.
It would also help him to endure a lingering death. But that would seem to be placing a penalty on the very people who perhaps have the most providence.
And both these families have 3 children too.
For the children's sake, we've got to reckon with the surviving parent's opportunity to remarry, and a woman with 3 children has a better chance to find a new husband than a very young widow with 6 children.
How can we possibly be sure of that?
As you can see, these committee members can barely be sure of anything. They're grasping for straws. Basically, they're determining someone's fate based on a sheet of paper. Many of the members felt ill at ease serving on the committee. The lawyer said, "As human beings ourselves, we rejected the idea instinctively of classifying other human beings in pigeonholes, but we realized we had to narrow the field somehow." And the minister felt similarly. "I went into this thing with a sense of bewilderment. I had never heard of this research or met any of these people before I was asked to serve. After our first meeting, I was very bothered. I felt I was forced to make decisions I had no right to make, and I felt that, of necessity, our selections would have to be made on the basis of inadequate information. Yet oddly enough, in the choices I have made, the correct decision appeared quite clear to me in each case. The principle of this thing has bothered me more than the practice." This was not an easy job, and I do not envy the people on this committee. While it's not clear how many patients the committee chose to reject or accept, the impact of those decisions had huge implications, condemning many to death and saving one. After the appearance of the article in Life magazine, there was a public outcry. Many people at the time derided the panel for being unethical at its principle. Some defended the panel as they were trying to do their best in rationing a life-saving treatment. In 1972, nearly a decade after the article was written, the US government established the ESRD program, or the End-Stage Renal Disease Program, making sure every patient who needed dialysis could receive it and the government would pay the bill. Nearly 60 years after the publication of the Life article, dialysis is no longer a limited resource in the United States. But there are extremely expensive medications where access to them is throttled by insurance companies due to their high prices. While the scale of death committees isn't the same, many patients experience rationing of care, so looking to the past can help guide us on potential pitfalls for the future of medicine. If you enjoyed this video, please comment below what other topics you'd like me to cover. I have a really long list of topics right now, but I'm always happy to hear more ideas for video suggestions. So thank you.